All right, put yourself in the cockpit for a second. You're a pilot. Your airplane is cruising southeast at exactly 200 miles per hour, but suddenly, out of nowhere, a 16.2 mile per hour wind hits you directly from the north. Now, you might think you're still heading to your exact destination, maybe just getting bumped around a little bit, but mathematically, physically, where does your plane actually end up?
This right here is the exact high-stakes dilemma we're going to solve today. Honestly, it's not just some abstract math problem. It's a real-world scenario that air traffic controllers and pilots deal with literally every single day. Because if you don't know how to calculate this, you're going to end up miles off course.
So, by the end of this explainer, you're going to completely understand the underlying concept of vectors, the formulas behind them, and exactly how to apply them to solve our airplane scenario. Here is our roadmap. 1. The airplane dilemma. 2. What exactly is a vector? 3. Adding and scaling vectors. 4. The component form. 5. The dot product. And 6. Solving the airplane problem.
Section 1. What exactly is a vector? Direction and magnitude.
Okay, to solve our airplane problem, we first have to build a solid mathematical foundation to describe movement and force. And that language? It's the vector. Simply put, a vector is a specific quantity drawn as a directed line segment. Now think about a standard line in geometry, right? It just goes on forever in both directions. Well, a vector is totally different. It has a very strict initial point where it begins and a terminal point where it ends. It's defined by two absolutely fundamental things. First, its magnitude, which is the physical length of the line, representing speed or force, and second, its direction, which is indicated by the arrowhead. It tells you exactly how much and exactly where to.
Now, vectors can kind of just float anywhere in space. But to actually do math with them easily, we like to pin their tails right to the origin of a graph. You know, the 0, 0 mark. We call this the position vector. And to find it, it's super easy. You just take the terminal or ending coordinates and subtract the initial or starting coordinates. It's simply x2 minus x1 and y2 minus y1. So if you start at coordinate 2, 3 and end at 6, 4, you just subtract them to get 4, 1. Boom! You've just anchored your vector.
But wait, hold on a second. This is important. Finding the magnitude, the length, is a breeze. You just use the good old Pythagorean theorem. But when students try to find the direction, the actual angle of the vector, using their calculator's inverse tangent function, they very often get the wrong answer. Why do we sometimes have to randomly add 180 or 360 degrees to our calculator's answer?
Well, the reason is that quadrant placement really matters. See, the inverse tangent function on your calculator is actually a bit blind. It only ever gives you angles in the first or fourth quadrants. So if your vector physically points up and to the left into the second quadrant or down and to the right into the fourth quadrant, your calculator's answer is going to be off. You literally must manually look at the graph and adjust the angle by adding 180 or 360 degrees to get the true positive directional angle. This is why you should always draw your vector first.
Section 2. Adding and scaling vectors. Combining forces.
Now that we understand the basic idea, let's move on to operations. Because vectors can be modified and combined, which brings us to two main things we can do with them. First up is scalar multiplication. This is really just multiplying your vector by a regular, everyday number, a constant. If you multiply a vector by 3, you don't change its direction at all. You just stretch its length out to be 3 times as long. But vector addition, that is entirely different. When you add two vectors together, you place them head to tail. You move along the first path, and from its end, you travel the second path. Doing this creates an entirely new trajectory, which we call the resultant vector.
Let's make this crystal clear with a quick math example. Let's say vector u moves 3 spaces right and 2 spaces down, and vector v moves 1 space left and 4 spaces up. How on earth do we add them? It's brilliantly simple, actually. You just add the horizontal components together and then the vertical components together. So 3 plus -1 is 2, and -2 plus 4 is 2. That's it. Our new resultant vector is simply 2, 2.
Section 3, the component form, breaking it down.
Now, dealing with diagonal arrows can get a bit complicated, so we need a systematic way to break them down. Let's connect this to real life with what I like to call the city grid analogy. Imagine your vector is taking a helicopter directly and diagonally from your hotel straight to a museum. It's the fastest, straightest path possible. But what if you have to walk? Well, you can't exactly walk diagonally through skyscrapers. You have to walk east along the horizontal city blocks and then north along the vertical city blocks to get to that exact same museum. Those horizontal and vertical walking paths, those are the components of your diagonal vector.
In math, we describe these city blocks using unit vectors.
We call one horizontal step to the right I, and one vertical step straight up j. These are vectors with a perfect tidy length of exactly 1. Notice how any diagonal vector can now be rewritten as a really simple algebra equation. Instead of using clunky brackets, a vector moving 3 spaces right and 4 spaces up simply becomes 3i plus 4j. It's awesome because it turns visual geometry into clean, simple algebra.
Section 4, the dot product, multiplying vectors. All right, so we've added and scaled vectors, but what actually happens when you multiply them? This brings us to an absolutely crucial operation called the dot product. And notice, I am warning you right now about a very, very common student mistake. When you add 2 vectors, you get a new vector. But when you multiply 2 vectors together using the dot product, the result is not a vector. No way. It is a single, regular number, a scalar.
Let's look at this table together to see just how simple the math actually is. To find the dot product, you just take the horizontal components of both vectors and multiply them. Here, 5 times -3 is -15. Then you multiply the vertical components. 12 times 4 is 48. Finally, you just add those two products right together. -15 plus 48 equals 33. The dot product is 33. No arrows, no directions, literally just a number.
Now, you may be sitting there asking, okay, the math is easy enough for sure, but what is a random number like 33 actually used for in real life? Like, why do we even care about the dot product? Well, the reason is that the dot product is the mathematical key we use to unlock the exact angle between 2 colliding forces. If you want to know the exact angle at which a billiard ball strikes another, or say the angle of a gust of wind hitting our airplane, you use this specific formula. The cosine of the angle equals the dot product of the 2 vectors divided by the product of their magnitudes. The dot product is basically your stepping stone to finding out exactly how forces interact in real physical space.
Section 5. Solving the airplane problem. Putting it all together.
Speaking of interacting forces, let's bring this explainer all the way back to the runway and solve our high-stakes airplane dilemma from the beginning. First, we plot the plane as a vector. Its magnitude is 200, pointing southeast at 140 degrees. Then, right from the tip of that plane vector, we plot the wind vector, a magnitude of 16.2, pointing straight south. This head-to-tail addition creates a perfect triangle. To find the plane's true path, our resultant vector, we just need the length of that third side. And because we have 2 sides and an enclosed angle, we can deploy the law of cosines, plugging in our speeds and our 140-degree angle.
And when we calculate that all out, we get our true ground speed. The result? 212.7 miles per hour. That's right. Because of the specific angle of the wind hitting the plane from the north as it travels southeast, the wind isn't just pushing the plane off course, it's actually acting as a slight tailwind, pushing the plane to a faster ground speed than its own engines are producing. And if we use the law of sines, we'd also find the wind shifted the plane's bearing by about 2.8 degrees.
So the absolutely crucial point here is that by breaking the world down into vectors, the invisible forces around us become completely predictable. Let's do a quick summary of what we've covered in this explainer today. We learned that vectors possess both magnitude and direction. Scaling stretches them, while adding them creates entirely new paths. We can break any diagonal path down into a horizontal and vertical city grid using I and j components. The dot product allows us to multiply these vectors to find the angles between them, and by combining all these tools, we can mathematically solve complex, real-world physics problems. You've now completely conquered 2-dimensional vector movement. But before we finish up today, I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. We just calculated our airplane's speed and drift on a flat 2D map. But what happens if that plane suddenly hits a vertical updraft, adding height and altitude into the mix? How do our unit vectors and dot products adapt when we tear them off the flat paper and throw them into full 3-dimensional space? Think about that, because that is exactly the mind-bending reality we're going to tackle in our next explainer. Keep learning, keep structuring your knowledge, and I will see you in